So I just want to first say thank you to all of you for joining us on this beautiful Monday morning here in front of the Orn Pape building, which houses the Department of Public Safety. We're holding our weekly press conference here this morning because we thought that it would be fitting to be surrounded by our selfless men and women of law enforcement, as well as other groups that want to see safer roads. In just a few minutes, the governor will be signing two pieces of legislation that both have the same goal in mind, and that's making our roads safer in Iowa. In the governor's Condition of the State address this year, he spoke about traffic deaths going from 320 in 2015 to 404 in 2016. We then challenged the legislature to take a hard look at the recommendations that were put forward to help us address this troubling trend. Today's signing ceremony is really the culmination of the great work the legislature did in a bipartisan fashion together to help make Iowa roads safer. The first bill that will be signed this morning is Senate File 234, and it was managed by Senator Breitbach and Representative Worthen, and I want to thank them both for their good work on this. Again, the bill was a product of collaboration and compromise between our legislators and stakeholder groups. In fact, the governor and I even participated in a press conference to discuss this topic earlier this year and heard the devastating stories of loved ones killed by texting and driving. The bill elevates the act of sending a message while driving to a primary traffic offense. And that means that if you're engaging in sending a text, an email, or video message of any kind, you can be pulled over and issued a citation. I'm confident that this bill will help send the message to drivers in our state: eyes on the road while driving. This bill would not have been possible without the help of local and state law enforcement, stakeholders like the Iowa Bicycle Coalition, and citizens that have lost loved ones to the careless act of motorists that was distracted by their phone while driving. And so again, I just want to say thank you to all of those that have played a role in helping us get these two pieces of legislation passed and sent to the governor for his signature. So I'd like to bring the governor to the podium, and he's going to talk about Senate File 444 that he'll also be signing today. Governor?
Thank you. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Kim Reynolds. In addition to Senate File 234 that Lieutenant Governor Reynolds spoke about, I will be signing another bill. It's also a major priority of our administration this year, which is Senate File 444. It was managed by Representative Zach Nunn and Senator Dan Dawson. And we want to thank all of the senators and representatives who are here and that have worked on passing these bills on a bipartisan basis. This bill contains two major components. Both of them will make an impact on driving behaviors in our state. First, the bill sets the penalty for a motorist that causes a vehicular homicide while sending an electronic message and driving. This bill sets the penalty as a Class C felony, which is punishable by up to 10 years in prison and a fine of $1,000 to $10,000. This measure should give prosecutors clarification on what charges should be brought against offenders, more adequate justice for those who have lost loved ones to this kind of behavior, and it also sends a message that our state takes this kind of reckless behavior very seriously. Second, this bill creates a new program designed to help address the problem of repeat drunk driving in our state. Last year, after discussing the troubling trends of increasing traffic deaths on our roads with Commissioner Ryan of the Department of Public Safety, we created an impaired driving coalition to study ways that Iowa could address the troubling statistics and the increase in deaths on our highways. This group was comprised of law enforcement and stakeholders from all across the state, and under the leadership of Pat Hoy, the chief of the Governor's Traffic Safety Bureau, came up with a menu of options for the state to consider in addressing this issue. And I recommended the legislature take a serious look at those in the Condition of the State address. I want to thank the people that served on that stakeholders group and law enforcement for their hard work and for giving the state an opportunity to tackle this very critically important issue. One suggestion from this coalition that showed great promise was the 24/7 program, which has been studied and proven to work in our neighboring state of South Dakota. We know that all of the OWI-related fatalities in Iowa, that of all of them, about 1/3 are caused by repeat OWI offenders. 1/3 caused by repeat offenders. This program is designed to address those Iowans who have repeatedly made the terrible decision to drive while intoxicated. We like this program not only because it has proven results in South Dakota, but also because it puts the burden of the cost on the offender, not on the taxpayer. Together, these two bills, which passed with strong bipartisan support, will make an impact on improving highway safety in our state. And I want to thank our Commissioner of Public Safety, Roxanne Ryan, for the leadership that she and her department have provided. And before I sign these bills, I'd like to ask Commissioner Ryan to say a few words about traffic safety and the importance of these new laws. Commissioner Ryan?
Thank you, Governor Branstad and Lieutenant Governor Reynolds, for your continued support for traffic safety for Iowans. At a time when traffic fatalities are increasing across the country, we truly appreciate the support for our joint efforts to reduce fatalities in Iowa. It is important for all of us to look at the loss of life as more than just a fatality. For law enforcement officers, the loss of life on our roadways is personal. Sometimes that fatality is a person that our troopers know as a member of their own community. Sometimes it's the trooper who must notify the next of kin about the loss of their loved one. Sometimes it is the trooper who investigates that fatal collision. And if it's not a trooper who responds, it's one of our members of the county sheriff's office or the city police department. No matter what the circumstances, every one of the 404 traffic deaths last year were people who left behind fathers and mothers, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, co-workers, and community members whose lives were affected by that loss. That is why we have seen broad support for these changes from all law enforcement agencies and from many others who share their concern for traffic safety. Many of those supporters actually are here today, and we thank them for their efforts as well. The bills that you are signing today will help us to address the behaviors that lead to the loss of life on our roads. When drivers are using their phones and other electronic devices, they're putting themselves and many others at risk, including other motorists, bicyclists, and even pedestrians. Senate File 234 and Senate File 444 will help law enforcement to hold these dangerous drivers accountable. And Senate File 444 provides an innovative approach to drunk driving that encourages drivers to remain sober and holds them accountable when they fail, even when no one else is hurt. Both of these bills are important steps towards safer roads in Iowa. It is appropriate that you are signing these bills in April, which is Distracted Driving Month. We thank you for your efforts, and we thank all of our traffic safety partners. We are not done yet, and we look forward to your continued support.
It's a lot.
We'll do an official photo if everyone wants to look here. Thank you very much.
And then we're going to have the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and Commissioner Ryan step up for questions from the press, if that's okay.
Hi. Good. Pen for you. Okay.
Governor, is your goal ultimately to ban to go hands-free?
Well, as you know, that's what I recommended. We are pleased that we saw this progress this year, and obviously we'll see how this works. But a number of states have gone beyond this. We were one of the last states to make it a primary offense to text and drive. I think there's only 4 states that hadn't done that. So this is certainly a good step in the right direction. I think it's going to make a difference. But I think going further with the hands-free would be something that should be considered in the future.
You actually called it hands-free.
Yeah.
You sponsored this 24/7
Right.
bill, but why didn't you put more weight behind the hands-free?
Well, we did what we could. You know, this is a legislative process that has to have bipartisan support. In this case, it did get bipartisan support, but there just weren't enough votes to pass the hands-free bill. And so, you know, this was something that we were able to get support for and get a constitutional majority in both houses of the legislature. So no governor gets 100% of what they recommend, but this is certainly a significant and positive step in the right direction for public safety.
And Lieutenant Governor Reynolds, is that something that you'll push for next year, the
Well, we'll continue to move toward that direction. That was our goal. I can tell you, I served in the Iowa Senate in 2009 when we passed the secondary offense, and that was that wasn't easy back then. We were going back and forth between making a primary and a secondary, and so as we continue to collect the data and continue to work towards bringing more people on board, that would be the ultimate end goal for me also.
Speaking of data,
Yeah.
in regards to accidents, troopers tell us that speed is a big factor.
Speed is a factor, and we need to enforce our laws with regard to speed as well. So we have issues involving impaired driving, distracted driving, excessive speed. All of these are issues that impact public safety. We had a long history of seeing traffic fatalities go down, and now we've seen that reversed and we've seen it go up. And it's a combination of things. Part of it is speed, part of it is distracted driving, part of it is impaired driving, but we need to address all of those issues, and we need to give our law enforcement the tools they need to effectively do that, and we need to send a very clear signal to the motorists that we're serious about this, and public safety is an important priority of the policymakers in this state. Yeah, okay.
We're slightly under where we were last year, but it still is higher than we want to see. The multiple fatality crashes are the ones that really make a big difference. We just had one a couple of weeks ago involving 5 young people, and so those are the ones that are especially tragic. But we also, when we talk about statistics, one of the things that we look at are lane departures, because when we don't have a primary texting law in Iowa, we don't really have a whole lot of data on texting because a lot of times we can't make those stops. But we do know that in about 68% of the fatalities, there was lane departure, and very often speed was also involved. So one of the things that we really want people to pay attention to is that when you are distracted, part of your distraction is that you're speeding as well. So in addition to crossing the center line and running into somebody head on, you're going faster than you should be. So it's a combination of factors that really makes a big difference. And with the new law, it may not be hands-free, but it covers so many more things. We went from having one of the weakest statutes in the country to one of the strongest statutes in the country, because we cover anything that you're doing on the internet, anything on your phone, anything on any other electronic device. We truly are making a difference, and I think when people begin to realize how distracted they are when they're driving, when they're using their electronic devices, hands-free is going to be a much easier argument to make in the future.
I would also say that Commissioner Ryan mentioned a tragic loss of 5 lives. This occurred in Mason City. It was a tragic accident that involved primarily teenagers, and it was a fiery crash. 5 people died. So that is the kind of thing we obviously want to avoid. Other questions? We can take questions on other subjects as well. Am I concerned about tuition? Well, first of all, let me say I'm proud of the fact that we have among the lowest tuition in the region at our state universities. We did have a period of a couple of years where we had tuition freezes and no increase. I would hope that tuition increases would continue to be modest. I'm very cognizant of that because I had to pay for my own college education, both by working and borrowing money, and it was a good investment. But I know I didn't get my last loan paid back until I was governor the first time, and so I know the impact this has on families, and I think we have to be very careful about the increases in tuition. I know during the Vilsack administration, we saw huge increases, sometimes 17 and 18%. We don't want to see double-digit increases in tuition. I think that would be inappropriate. I'm cognizant of the challenges the universities are faced, and I'm appreciative of the fact that in recent years, with the tuition freezes and the reduction in keeping the cost of tuition down, we've been able to see a reduction in student debt, and that's something that I think we want to continue to work on.
Governor, in about an hour, there'll be that public hearing on the budget. What do you say to people who are concerned that this is going to cut too much?
Well, we have to abide by the law. We passed, back in the 90s, spending reforms that says the legislature can spend no more than 99% of the revenue estimate. My budget was based on the December revenue estimate, and as you all know, the March revenue estimate was reduced substantially. The legislature has an obligation to live within the law that says they can spend no more than 99% of that March revenue estimate. This is not easy, but I want to give them credit. Last year we had a reduction in March as well. The legislature did the responsible thing, and they lived within that spending limitation. In other times, we've seen people use one-time money for ongoing expenses. We've seen various budgeting tricks that have been used in other states. So all you have to do is look at Illinois. They haven't had a budget in more than 2 years. We don't want to go there. We want to be responsible. Iowa has one of the best managed states in the country, and we've been impacted by the reduction in farm income due to commodity prices being below the cost of production. So this is a tough budgeting year. But I want to also compliment the legislature. They met the obligation of deciding supplemental state aid for schools in the first 30 days of the session. They provided a $40 million increase. Public school education did not have any reduction in the de-appropriation that occurred for this year, fiscal 2017, and they're going to get a $40 million increase for next year. But other areas of the budget, obviously, the legislature has an obligation to live within the spending limitations, and they're working hard to do that. And we're obviously concerned that there's some challenging and difficult decisions they have to make this year. But I'm proud of the fact that they're making those decisions, and they're doing it in a thoughtful way. They're not doing across-the-board cuts, but they're making thoughtful decisions in light of the financial realities. I would also say, because of the collective bargaining reforms, there will be some additional flexibility in those budgets, because we anticipate the savings is going to be in the tens of millions of dollars for state government, as well as for the community colleges and the state universities.
Governor, speaking of state universities, do you agree with phasing out environmental research centers at the state universities, and why target those as opposed to all of the other research centers at the universities?
Well, with regard to the University of Iowa's Flood Center, I believe that, and we've had discussions with the legislators, key legislators on this, that a substantial share of that funding is going to be restored. They played an important role in helping provide for the information we needed to deal with the flooding along the Cedar River last fall. And with regard to the energy program being shifted to the Department of Economic Development. In fact, energy and economic development kind of go hand in hand, and one of the advantages Iowa has is we have low-cost, reliable energy, and more of it is renewable. And that's a great asset, and I think the Economic Development Department is an appropriate place. We did combine the Energy Department with Economic Development back first year that Lieutenant Governor and I were back in office in 2011. I think that's worked effectively.
But they're zeroing out the Leopold Center, they're phasing out the Segler Center at University of Iowa by 2022. I mean, those two things are directly related to environmental research.
Well, again, we recognize and want to work with the legislature on these things. We think that they have difficult decisions to make with regard to the level of spending, and obviously we don't get everything that we request, but we want to work with them to make the best and most thoughtful decisions with the budget limitations that we have and the fact that they have to live with the March revenue estimate and not spending more than 99% of the projected revenue.
But do you agree that the Leopold Center's work about manure management is done?
Well, I think dramatic progress has been made in manure management, and we're doing a much better job now of seeing that this valuable nutrient is basically knifed in and instead of being spread on the surface. And so a lot of changes have made over the last 20 years or so. I think we need to continue to look at things that can be done to improve water quality, such as the recommendations that came out of the research that was done at Iowa State that are now part of the nutrient reduction strategy.
Rod, you've been a proponent of two-year budgeting.
Yeah.
The budgets they're passing are just 50% for the second year and nothing for K-12.
Yeah, I would prefer that we have a full two-year budget. I'm aware of the fact that the legislature historically has provided 50% funding in the second year. I'm appreciative of the fact that they did decide supplemental state aid early in the first 30 days, meeting the law for the first time in many, many years. I would prefer that they passed a full two-year budget as we recommended, but I also recognize that there's a lot of concern that we've seen the revenue estimate reduced March of last year, October of last year, December of last year, and again March of this year. And I think because of that, legislators are apprehensive. They don't want to have to do a de-appropriation again next year. I would prefer that we do a two-year budget, but I do understand the apprehension that they have and the fact that they don't want to have to go through what they had to go through this year and do a de-appropriation at the beginning of the next session.
Brianne, you get the last question.
The legislature's proposed a budget that's about $40 million less than what you would propose. Do you see this as a good opportunity to cut back on the size and scope of this new government?
I didn't hear the last part of your question. Cut down
Cut
there.
down the size and scope of government is this motion.
Well, of course, we have been significantly reducing the size and scope of government since we came into office in 2011. We're down, I think, well over 2,000 employees, and we're always looking for better, more efficient ways to deliver services, using technology more effectively, training people to be more efficient, and we're going to continue to do that. And we're going to do that in good times and bad times, but I'm proud of the fact that we have a smaller and smarter government than we had when we took office.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.